path. I know somebody who, was in the corporate world for a long time, retired, and decided that what he wanted to do was work in Home Depot and like the plumbing department. And I would say, maybe it's not a question of retirement, but getting to a work optional lifestyle where you can just decide if it's something that you want to do or not.
That's good advice.
I love that term.
Yeah,
that optional
really
lifestyle.
Good advice.
Okay.
Although I would never work at a Home Depot. I hate dude stores.
You hate Home Depot. Welcome to the Skittle Squad Podcast, your one-stop shop for all Tampa Bay LGBTQ plus community news, local events, local businesses, and nonprofits. And of course, our favorite thing, talking with our guests. My name is David Smith, and I'm with my co-host.
I'm Paul Pfeiffer.
Hey, Paul. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Good. So 30% stud, 70% muffin today, huh?
Yeah, but I feel like the percentages are off, like they should be reversed.
Oh, 70% stud and 30% muffin. But
yeah.
Honestly, that whole t-shirt, I think, might be a little wrong.
Why?
Shouldn't it say muffin top?
Bitch. Okay. You're so rude.
Anywho, I thought it was funny, but maybe not. Isn't muffin and muffin top the same thing?
Possibly, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Hey, I mean, I know I'm fluffy. I've said it before. I embrace my fluffiness.
Right.
It is what it is. So
yeah, I was thinking muffin and muffin top were pretty much the same thing.
Pretty much.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to move forward through that awkward conversation. So, Paul, you were saying that you had potentially thought about maybe coloring your hair.
Oh, so, okay. So I felt like a star today because I had a hair appointment before we were in the studio today.
Right.
So I was like, oh, I'm a star, because I'm having all this hair done and everything before we go in. But my hairdresser was like, I was saying as she was cutting my hair, because it had gotten pretty long. Because you saw it Wednesday. I mean, it was getting pretty long.
Yeah.
And as she's cutting my hair, like all this gray hair is all over the place. I'm like, oh my God, look at all the gray. And she's like, well, we could color your hair. And I was like, I don't know. Like I was too scared to think about it.
Well, what color were you considering?
Oh, she was talking about going light, like light. Yeah.
Like a blonde?
No, I don't think like
a light brown?
Platinum blonde or anything like that. But maybe a little bit lighter so that it kind of blended in more with the gray, instead of not being so dark on top. So, but I didn't do it. So
I think you should try it.
No.
Oh, okay. I think it would be cool.
No.
I had a hairdresser back in the day, and she would always color my hair, even when I had no hair in the back.
Was this like back in when you were 20? Because I feel like you lost your hair like really.
Yes, this was when I was in my 20s, and then one day she showed me a mirror, of the back of my head, and I was like, "Why are we coloring my hair? I don't have any more hair." So yeah, she just didn't want to let that go. But anyway, I had like that brown red color. Anyway. So
I have tried to go light before. Like when I was younger, I would try to go lighter before, but I have red tones in my hair. So my hair always turned out to be more strawberry blondish versus the blonde that I was really, looking for.
Right.
So I just, I've done highlights here and there. Like I'll get highlights or lowlights or whatever, but even then, it's been like a long time ago, so I've just pretty much left it the way it is.
Well, of course, I am just jealous because you have hair. So, congrats!
Yeah. Thank you.
It looks good.
I do have hair.
So it's so funny because we were talking earlier about, would you ever consider having your partner have like full access to your mobile phone?
So here's the thing. And for those of you who are in the audience, so David likes to be very, very prepared before we go on the show, and I'm more off the cuff. So this is why the shows are kind of sporadic the way they are, because you're very prepared and I'm very not prepared, off the cuff. I just, whatever comes out of my mouth is what I talk about, so on and so forth. So he brings up this subject of like he always drafts up, and I appreciate this, notes on the guests and
what
potential
we're
hot
gonna do,
topics and so on and so forth, which is really
Yeah.
great. You know, I do look through them, and I saw this as one of the hot topics, and I was like, why is he even bringing that up? Because number one, he's single, so he's got no one who wants to look through his phone. Like, why is he like? For what reason do you want to talk about this? So I'm curious before I even go down the road of me. Like, why did you consider that to be a hot topic?
Well,
like,
you do have to remember, I was in a relationship for 10 years.
Oh, so did he
I
want
was
to go
married
through
for
your
10
phone?
years. Well, here's the interesting thing. So if we're gonna like flip this back on me, which is fine. So before I was married for 10 years, I had a long-term relationship for like 5 years. And I decided that I was going to track his internet activity while I was out of town.
What?
And so while I was gone, I found him trolling Craigslist.
Oh my God.
Can you believe that?
You're like a sneaky bitch.
Oh, I was so upset. Oh yeah,
You're
I was so
hardcore.
upset. So it was pretty hardcore.
Yeah, no wonder
And you
you're
know what I
single,
learned
because
from-
nobody wants to be with someone who does that.
Well, here's the thing. I was so young then. But you know what I learned from that? Don't ever do that.
Right.
Like, talk about ruining your life.
Right.
Oh my God, it was the absolute most horrible
Right.
thing I had ever done. And I would never do that again. And so when I was married for 10 years after that, me and my partner, we did have full access to each other's phones, and it was like no big deal.
That's so funny because, you know, remember I told you that story? I think it was when we were talking about coming out stories, and I told you my mom was coming from Illinois down to Atlanta, and I said, oh shit, I've got to tell her that I'm gay because I was living with a man at the time. And, you know, how do you explain that? Right.
Right.
So that man went on a business trip one time, and this was when AOL was still around.
Okay.
So he had left himself still logged into AOL.
Okay.
So I went on the computer and it was under his account, and all of a sudden this prostitute starts IMing him, instant
wow.
messaging him and saying, when are we going to meet up? And blah, 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 blah. And I was like, this fucker is paying for sex.
Wow.
I'm like, what the hell?
Oh my gosh.
So
well, I already
that
offended
put
you
an
once, so I won't say
end-
anything else.
I mean, that put an end to that relationship like really super quick.
Wow.
But now I'm an open book,
Yeah.
David. I mean, you know that I talk about everything and anything, and there's nothing really off limits with me. So absolutely. I mean, I would totally let, you know, Rick go through my phone if he wanted to, although he would never want to do that.
Right.
But if he wanted to, you know, he could. And he was like, but we do have to share each other's passwords, because he's got a valid point, because he said, we talked about this today actually, that if something were to happen to me,
Right.
he wouldn't know like some of my friends' phone numbers
got you.
to get in touch with them
Right.
to say, oh, you know, Paul is in the hospital, or Paul's
Right.
dead, or Paul fell off a cliff, or
Yes.
whatever. So he does need to have access to my phone in case he's got to call people if something were to happen to me, and vice versa. So,
Yeah.
but no, I mean, he can get on my Facebook. He can get, you know, I don't have anything to hide. So
Well, how would you feel if he had your phone for a full hour? Would you go through withdrawal?
So what are you insinuating? Yes, I would. Because I'm
okay.
always on my phone.
I know.
So, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Just curious.
No,
okay.
no, he can't have access to my phone for like more than a couple of minutes. Because
yeah.
I need to be back on the phone.
Yeah, they do say apparently if you're having an emergency, if you go in your contacts and you can literally label certain people, like if an emergency call, or, you know, mom or dad or husband or wife, you know, and that way the police can actually, like, you know who to contact if there is something that
I'll
might
have to check
happen.
that out, because I didn't know that was
just,
available.
Yeah, just an idea. You can
Okay.
just put that in the
Because Rick is my
contact
emergency
name.
contact in the contact, like in my contact list.
Okay.
But it's
yeah.
just Rick. It's not
Right.
anybody else. So I guess if we die in a plane crash on our way to San Francisco, we're both screwed, because nobody's ever going to know. So,
Oh, okay.
although you would know, because I wouldn't show up at the show. You'd be like, where the hell is Paul?
As soon as I didn't see you posting on Facebook, I would be very, very concerned something horrible had happened.
I am not that bad. Good Lord.
I love your Facebook post. I love everything you're doing from a social component. Yeah, I think it's great. Well, I think we've officially had our first awkward Hot Topics.
I don't think it was awkward at all.
Oh, okay.
No.
All right.
No. It's just
Okay.
the way we normally. So I feel like now, now that we've been on the show for a while and we're starting to grow within the show and so on and so forth, this is how we normally banter back and forth,
Normally.
like in real life, like
normally.
not even on the show. So this is just the way we interact normally. So it's not awkward at all. It's
I
just
think the
us.
only difference is that you give me prompts with your T-shirts to really go in if I need to.
Absolutely.
Okay, all right. It's like
If
open game.
If you can't make fun of yourself, then you know.
Yeah, that's true.
So
All right. Well, this was definitely fun. We are really excited to bring on our first guest. His name is Dean Hershkowitz. He's a financial advisor, and we will be chatting with him in just a few moments. Stay tuned. Welcome back. We are excited to have our guest on today because with the markets maybe going up, going down, people are panicking and we're like, no, don't panic. We need a financial expert on our show. So we've brought in Dean Hershkowitz. He's a seasoned financial advisor and advocate for inclusive wealth planning, here to share his insights on navigating the market and really from that lens of the LGBTQ plus community, what we need to do to protect ourselves. Welcome, Dean.
Thank you.
hey, Dean.
So, Dean, first of all, tell me again, how do you pronounce your last name?
Hershkowitz.
Hershkowitz, okay. So you said you grew up, you had some sisters, and you just learned, okay, just like respond to anything? Or?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay,
Pretty
all
much.
right.
If you
well,
look my general direction, I'll just say, yeah, what can I do?
well, welcome to the show. We're really excited to have you on board. You know, in our, I guess you would say, political climate, you know, things are a little volatile right now and it's hitting the markets pretty hard. So we really wanted to bring on somebody that could be an expert in this area, really to just bring calm, bring peace, bring a sense of sensibility to what's going on and kind of just explain, you know, how we can really navigate this from an emotional mindset, an emotional component. And then also, you know, later on, we can talk about how to protect ourselves and things like that. So welcome to the show. Maybe you could give a little bit of background about you. And
Sure. So I am almost a St. Petersburg native, moved down here at a very young age and have been here most of the time since, but had a restaurant in downtown St. Petersburg that a lot of people were familiar with and sold that in 2019, sort of just in time
that was great time.
I beat COVID by about 6 months.
Wow.
And transitioned into what I, you know, always knew that I wanted to do, which was be in the financial services field. And so I started out wholesaling bonds and, you know, I had a very small bit of people's, you know, financial, you know, portfolio. And, just felt kind of limited because there's only so much that I can help them with and so much, you know, that I could provide for them.
Right.
And so then decided that I just wanted a little bit more and moved into really comprehensive financial planning where I can, you know, help with every stage of life and every, you know, financial circumstance and really help people build plans that will, you know, weather whatever the storm is. And make sure that we can help them to accomplish all of their goals.
Yeah, and we're going to definitely talk about that in a few minutes about really what people need to do, how to navigate it. But when you think about really those different age brackets, obviously you've got a different financial strategy for each. I don't know if you classify in your industry as like by decade or, you know, if there's certain things, but maybe you could do like a quick overview of like maybe what does someone do in their 20s versus 30s and then kind of on upward.
So the most important thing I would say, especially for someone, you know, in 20s and 30s is don't wait.
Okay.
You know, it doesn't matter what you can contribute. It's just that you have time on your side.
Okay.
And waiting, you know, if you can put away $20 out of a paycheck, $10 out of a paycheck in your 20s versus trying to put, you know, $200 or $300 out of a paycheck by the time you get to, you know, your 40s, it's going to be a whole lot harder to catch up.
Okay. That's a great piece of advice. Yeah, especially for those 20s and 30 years old that are like really living check to check. Put that $10 in the bank every week and really just try to save it. Yeah, for sure. And then what about when you get into your 40s?
You have to be a little bit more. You have to be a little bit more serious about it, right? You know, I'm about to turn 40, and you know, and all of a sudden I've been really saying maybe I don't need to buy that. Maybe I should, ramp up what I'm saving just a little bit more. And it's just a shift that happens over time, a little bit, well, we talked about this the other day. I'm a little bit less concerned about, spending the money on, cruises and trips and things, and more concerned about.
But Dean, I need my eye cream.
Yes, you definitely do.
I'm just kidding. But yeah, we were talking about, it's expensive to be gay. You want those clothes. You need those haircuts. Potentially you might even think about dyeing your hair. I mean, you know what I mean? So anyway, yeah, I hear you.
So yeah, you just, and it's not about not enjoying life. It's not about enjoying what you're working for. It's about metering it so that, as you get to that retirement age, that you can enjoy it as much or more then, versus try to, say in your 70s, decide that you can't have the things that you used to.
Yeah, you had shared a story with me about somebody that was older and they had called you, and it was surprising. Tell me, do you remember what you had said they were?
So I get a lot of calls from people that have, I would say waited too long. And, oftentimes people will, retire with no plan in place, and no, sort of ability to stress test, their financial plan.
Okay.
And you just sort of spend willy-nilly. And then, somebody will call me and say, I'm concerned that I don't have enough money for retirement. Well, at that point, the option of going back to work is probably off the table.
Right.
And so, if you're having those thoughts, there's a pretty darn good chance that you're right.
Wow. Okay. And you had even said you had folks calling you and they had been in retirement for a while, and then they call you and they said, I think I might be out of money soon. Yeah.
Yeah. I met with a client who, I had to say to her, you've got 6, maybe 7 more years if you spend the way that you do. And then we're out of money, and you're on Social Security alone. And, and at that point, then it's like, do you want to have to sell your house? Do you want to have, what are you gonna do? Those are supposed to be the best years, right? Once that's what we're told, is that we're working for it, we're saving for it. And, and then those are our golden years, except if you're out of gold.
Right.
Yeah. Now, Paul, I know you had a question for Dean.
So my husband is we're both very much financial planning and looking for our future. And I have plans to retire at the age of 62. And I think I'm going to be able to do that, pretty confident that I'll be able to do that. Rick is very much, he looks at things a little bit differently than I do. I'm more conservative in my investments, whereas he looks more at what is paying out dividends and how can those dividends supplement the income that I'm getting from, he gets a pension, he'll be collecting Social Security, so on and so forth. I'm more conservative in the fact that I feel that at some point in time, Social Security is not going to be around as a safety net anymore, with the political environment the way it is. So let's try and invest in things that can, and not take Social Security into consideration. So I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are in terms of, should people be depending on Social Security as a safety net, or with the times the way they are now, should they kind of take that out of the equation to make sure that they have enough money when they're ready to retire? Like, what is your thought on that?
So for most people, Social Security is a very important component of retirement. It's not the only component by any means. It just can't be. By design, originally, it was supposed to be a livable wage. It's not. But I do think it'll always be there. It may make up a slightly less meaningful portion of our retirement income and our retirement income strategy, but I wouldn't worry that it's going to go to nothing. But so it can be a portion of what we're relying on for retirement, just not 100% of it. And firstly, it's completely normal for couples to have, different investment strategies and different risk tolerance. We deal with that all the time. I've seen, more than one fight between spouses over those sort of things and spending habits, but we can account for that. And, I would say that, we want to be sure that we have, plenty in good quality investments and even a couple of different strategies. Things like life insurance also plays a big role in that. Especially for couples, if somebody has some sort of just say long-term care event, are you going to say, well, we've spent your half of the money already? You're not. So you have to protect against those sort of things too. And I would say that's a bigger piece of the plan than, worrying about Social Security reliance.
Yeah. And that's a really good point, because when my grandfather passed away, he had no life insurance. So my mother had to pay for all the funeral expenses, all of that stuff. And it was a big burden to her because it was not, she wasn't expecting to have to put up that expense. And to get, even getting cremated, costs, quite a bit. But if you go through the whole, funeral thing where you're going to the funeral home, you're getting the visitation, you're getting buried, so on and so forth. I think his funeral ran, and this was in a small town in Illinois, $15,000 or more.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And that's a lot of money to someone who wasn't expecting to have that expense. So
it can easily run between $5,000 and $30,000.
Yeah.
So definitely, I'm an advocate for making sure you have life insurance, and that, I'm life insured up the wazoo just because I want to make sure, Rick has enough money if something happens to me, that he's got enough money to pay everything off, and that he can still, live comfortably without my income coming in. So,
and then Dean, I think you had said really quick, talking about that long-term care component, you were saying that you would designate certain funds like 50-50, and then once those funds are depleted, if the other spouse is still alive, then what would, is there a way, is there a strategy, is there a way to do that? Because I know when my parents, they were, failing, their health was failing, and we're looking at long-term care facilities and things like that. It's like, well, when they were both alive, my mom, she had, they had a certain amount of dollars, but then we had to save or protect a certain number of dollars for my father that was going to continue living after she passed.
Sure. So having a hybrid life insurance policy that allows for long-term care expenses is a good part of it. But the other thing is sort of knowing that if you deplete more than your half, say, to know that you'll be able to, sort of put that money back into the coffers when somebody or if somebody passes away is definitely important. You want to be able to care for, your loved ones, as best as you can. You want to be in the best places,
Right.
But there's, life still.
Right.
So, so you just have to plan for it and be sure that, you've got that in place. And of course, that's another thing. The time to do that is when you're young. For permanent life insurance strategy or long-term care insurance, you have to do it when you're youngish and healthy. Once you're not insurable anymore.
Right.
Yeah, so we had talked about kind of what you do in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s. A lot of people watching our show are probably 50 plus. Now, what would you suggest, or what would your recommendations be if someone is 50 or in their 50s or 60s and they're just starting to think about saving for retirement now? What would you suggest?
That's a tough one. But, for certainly meeting with a financial planner as soon as possible would be suggestion number one.
Okay.
Take a look at, what your savings looks like. A lot of people have several small 401ks scattered around. They're maybe not really actively managed. And, you're saying, well, it's growing a little bit, so we'll just leave it, do its thing, and hopefully it'll be enough. But you really have to look at, all of that combined, and you have to look at your spending. You have to look at what age do you really want to retire by?
Right.
And then start paying for that retirement as if it's a monthly bill. You have to start funding it, and you have to be a little bit flexible, especially if you're starting in your 50s, to be able to say, maybe 62 isn't it, but maybe 68 is, or 71, or maybe
I can't even imagine. Sorry.
71, Dean, are you trying to kill us?
No.
And retirement looks different for a lot of people.
I'm just kidding.
So, retirement could be leaving your, full-time job and working part-time, doing something else.
Consulting or something.
Yeah. So I know somebody who, was in the corporate world for a long time, retired, and decided that what he wanted to do was work in Home Depot and the plumbing department. And, he always enjoyed being a DIYer. He had things that he could share to help people. If he doesn't want to go to work that day, he doesn't have to, So I would say, maybe it's not a question of retirement, but getting to a work optional lifestyle, where you can just decide if it's something that you want to do or not.
That's good
Wow,
advice.
I love that term.
Yeah, that is
optional
really
lifestyle.
Good advice.
Okay.
Although I would never work at a Home Depot. I hate dude stores.
You hate Home Depot.
Hate dude stores.
Does
You haven't seen some of the guys that come in there, huh?
No, I have, but there's a running joke between me and my husband where, he wants to go. He's very handy around the house. He remodeled our entire kitchen by himself. So he always wants to go to, I call them the dude store. So it's either Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever. And I tell him, he wants me to come with him. And I'm like, I don't want to go, but if I'm going to go, you either have to give me tacos or ice cream, one of the two. So otherwise I'm not going. So
Right.
That's the deal.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah. But do you think we'll have the show when we're 71?
I hope
71, I think we'll probably just come in as guests. I'm sure we'll have younger hosts at that point, but I'm sure it'll still be called the Skittle Squad. Yeah, we may have to have someone come take
It'll
over.
be more like those two guys from the Muppet Show sitting up in the...
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
Well, I feel
yeah.
like you look like one of them already.
Oh, snap.
I opened the door for that. Sorry.
Oh, I don't care. That's okay. That's okay. It's totally fun. I know. It's so sad. I know this is a complete side note, but Hollywood Studios actually is removing the Muppet Show.
What?
Yeah.
Aw.
It had been in existence since, I think, 92. And I had just recently seen
That
it.
is
And I just
sad.
I loved those old guys up in the balcony. I think one of the guys' name was Stan. Anyway, they were great.
I can't remember. See, Dean, we go off on tangents every so often, so you just got to roll
Same.
with it.
Same.
So,
So, Dean, you've probably seen a lot. You've been really in this industry kind of your whole life, right? I'm sure there's been a crazy or funny story you could share with us, and maybe something that had happened, and then names can be optional. Is there anything you'd like to share?
names. I've seen it all.
Really?
I have
Okay.
seen it all. And I had somebody very recently who came in to meet with me, and I try to qualify people on the phone sort of before I have them come into the office
Right.
or really meet with them to see what they're thinking about. And I had a lady who she was referred by another client, and she said she'd never invested before, and wanted to start with. She told me she wanted to start with $10,000 and see how it went and what her comfort level was, and then sort of decide from there. And I said, well, we'll have to sort of talk through that and see, because if we start with that, we want it to be part of a plan, right?
Okay.
And so we talked for a good bit on the phone about what that would look like, and and the sort of information that I would need to be able to really be able to help her. Well, I felt comfortable that she understood, and that we were on the same page. She comes in with $10,000 in cash
Oh, wow.
Which is a problem.
Was it in pennies? No, just kidding.
and said, I want you to take this and pick one stock that you think can double in the next
no pressure.
in the next 12 months.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I can't do that. Right. If I did, I would not be working every single day.
Right.
So that was one of the crazier things that I've been asked.
Yeah.
That was pretty recently. She said, well, there's a great buying opportunity, and so we should be able to double this, and then I'll just have $20,000 in a year, and I'll be done. So no, that is not how it works.
Let me wave my magic wand.
Yeah.
Well, I gave her printed instructions on how to get to the Hard Rock and stuff. Right. And you've got a better shot of it that way.
Oh my goodness,
Wow.
that is really funny. So what would be maybe the pillars of like a solid financial portfolio, or what you would help people with when they would come see you?
So you have to keep in mind, what are your needs? What are non-negotiables you absolutely have to have?
Okay.
What are the wants, the things that you really would like to have? And then, sort of those pipe dreams or, wishes that, that it would be nice if we could have that happen. For a lot of people, that's that wealth transfer that we hear a lot about, be it organizations that you want to benefit from, whatever you have left, or relatives or something like that. So we sort of put that in that third, category. Something like, having a convertible for the weekends, maybe that's one of those wants that's probably pretty attainable. Maybe it's a vacation home in the mountains at some point, or a boat, but we have to, put that in sort of that middle column. And, but the first column is making sure that all of our real needs are met and that our bills are paid and we're healthy and all of those things. So, so we look at that. We look at what you have, what your sort of earning potential is, and then sort of what protection strategies we can put in place to be sure that money, will last and make it. And so those are the things that we look at. And it's about, when is your mortgage going to be paid off? When does that 401k that you have actually vest, so that we can make decisions about maybe a career change when it's going to be, the most beneficial from a financial standpoint. All of those things we want to look at very holistically and take into account as part of that planning process.
Okay. Wow.
So maybe you might want a trip to space, for example. How would you finance a trip to space 65 feet in the air, or however many miles?
Yeah, 62 miles up. Hopefully
we
you
can
can
put
get a
away
sponsorship.
$10,000 from each paycheck.
There you go. Yeah. Then you can be like Gayle King and Katy Perry.
Ooh.
That's so funny.
I don't want to go to space. I'm pretty happy right here.
Yeah, I agree. I think, going on an airplane, I'm good. I'm good with, that's my max, maybe 47,000 feet.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you got a lot of calls at the office as the markets were swinging up and then down and then down and then down, and then Trump made a decision, and then up and then down and then up. So I'm sure you've had a lot of calls with people potentially logging into their 401k or their portfolio and seeing this loss or these losses come in. So as a financial advisor, what piece of information, or how do you help your clients kind of navigate, stay calm through the turmoil in the markets going up and down?
Having a plan and being prepared is the most important part of that. And so for some of my clients, they, especially those that are in what I'd call an accumulation of wealth phase, they get excited when there's volatility. We've talked about it. They know what we're going to do, and feel super ready. For people on the other side that are, in retirement, that are spending, there can be some concern, but honestly, pretty minimal. Out of all of my clients, I think I heard from 5 that were genuinely concerned.
Okay.
But, that can sort of change by the minute also.
Right.
So the important thing is to have that plan, have that partnership. You know, it sounds kind of silly, but you know, if you're on a hike and all of a sudden there's a bear behind you, you know, and you have to decide, do you want to, you know, turn left or turn right at this trail? You know, how are you going to pick? Now, you can call somebody and they can say, whatever you do, don't panic. Is that really going to help you? or would you rather have had a discussion about what to do if there's a bear chasing you in advance?
Right.
Have somebody with you, you know, on that hike that says, hey, remember this, we talked about turning right here. There's there's somewhere where we can go to get away. Mm-hmm. You know, if you've planned and you've partnered with somebody and you know you're not alone and you know what's going to happen, then there's very little to worry about.
Yeah, and I think one thing you shared with me was that when you do that planning, you have taken into consideration these swings. Mm-hmm. And so if you, like you said, you know, you've planned for the ups and you've planned for the downs. Yeah.
So if you were a client, we would have had a discussion and said, if we stick to this plan and we make some modifications along the way as we need to, in just say 925 out of 1,000 trials, you know, in all of these scenarios that we've run, you have enough money for your needs and wants, and maybe, you know, 870 out of 1,000, you know, for your needs, wants, and wishes. We know this. We can look at the chart and we can say, you know, these are all of the times that we expect a, you know, down market as part of your financial plan. And we've been putting away a little bit of cash. You know, to your point, we've got some dividends that are accumulating cash so that we can use that as an opportunity to buy in. And, you know, and then we're ready for it and we're taking advantage of it as best as we can.
Yeah, I always feel like when the market goes down, that's exciting because then you can, you know, potentially make some investments that you couldn't do in the market.
Sale.
Yeah, right. Who doesn't love a good sale? Thank you, Dean. There we go. That's our sound clip. We're gay. Who doesn't love a good sale?
Well, can we go back to the bear scenario? So what kind of bear is chasing us? That's what I want to know.
Not the good kind.
Okay.
I guess it's what was it? The Sasquatch?
Sasquatch.
Yeah.
Sasquatch.
Yeah. Paul recently was looking for them on his trip to the mountains, but no sightings, unfortunately.
Yeah, no sightings of Sasquatch.
So he did get to see some scat, though, which was pretty exciting.
It was so gross.
Anyway, that's great. So
as long as you didn't step in it, it's...
No, it was in a display case.
It was behind
it was in a
plastic
museum.
display
They had
case.
it on a display case. It was
What kind of museums
disgusting.
are you going to?
Sasquatch Museum. It was totally disgusting. Anyway.
So now we know how Paul spends his free time. Anywho. So, yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up.
I guess it beats tracking the markets in all your spare time.
Well, Rick probably does that every day, it sounds like.
Rick is obsessed. I mean, literally. Like, you know how you made a comment on the last episode about I'm always on my phone?
Right.
My obsession with my phone and social media is similar to his obsession with his portfolio. He is constantly looking at his portfolio. And when he's not looking at his portfolio, he's talking to people on the phone about how much money he's made in his portfolio.
So
like he's like really proud of what he's...
And he doesn't use a financial advisor.
No, he does it on his own. He researches on his own. He just does it on his own.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
So, you know, we really have this niche of the LGBTQ plus community. And I feel like there are maybe some things that we want to talk about as far as like, how do we as a community maybe protect our assets, or, you know, as we get to those later stages of life, you know, how do we navigate that component of our culture and community?
So I think the most important thing is to find somebody to work with that you're comfortable with.
Okay.
That you can have honest and open discussions about. If you aren't willing to give somebody the whole picture, it's going to be really difficult for them to help you. But the other thing is you have to be realistic with yourself and your expectations. You know, if you think that you can just figure it out when you get there, it's not going to go that well. But you know, and And that goes with a, financial advisor, that goes with somebody to help you with estate planning, whatever it may be. You want to find somebody that you trust and feel comfortable with to partner with on those things. Because, it is different. And, for a lot of us that, we don't have kids, we don't have, some of the, traditional things that maybe we would want to, build legacy for. Frankly, we can be a little bit more aggressive with our spending because we're not so worried about what's left over.
Right.
So that's something to take into account in the planning. So, that's one of the things that I would say is it's got to be somebody who you're honest and open with, and somebody that understands the differences in what our community is, building for, saving for, and some of the concerns too. I think marriage is one of those things where, that's sort of new to us as a community, and it's changed the way that we plan. But the potential that it's not always there could also be, something that we have to take consideration for. So it's just, having an understanding of that and knowing this is how we pivot if we get there.
Yeah, and that's a good point too. Not that because you're not married, but if you were married, Rick and I mean, we keep our finances like completely separate. Like we do have a household account where we pay for the household, like the mortgage and that kind of thing. But other than that, we keep everything else separate, mainly because I've got burned on that in a previous relationship. And I'm like not allowing anyone to have access to, what I've got in investments or anything again. But it goes further than that, because when you think about it, it's not just the financials. Like you want to know what their wishes are if something were to happen to them. Like Rick and I recently had this conversation where, I was like, you know what? If something happens to you, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Am I supposed to bury you in the backyard? Am I supposed to put you in a hefty bag on the side of the road? Am I supposed to stuff you and put you in a corner somewhere? Like we haven't had that discussion on what your last wishes are. He knows I want to be cremated and I want my ashes scattered over Maui because I love Maui and that's one of my favorite places. So it goes further than just the financial part when you're in a married relationship. Like you have to know, what your wishes are from a financial standpoint. You also have to know what your wishes are from a long-term standpoint. And that includes what you brought up, long-term care. Some people may not want to be put in a long-term care facility, may want to stay at home and have someone come into the home and provide, those medical services directly in the home.
Yeah. So, and it's interesting because I think it's a big communication component because like before my father passed, he told us what he wanted, but then in those last months it changed, you know what I mean? And so, you do have to be flexible, but really the key to everything that really we're talking about right now is the planning component. Yeah. Being prepared.
And the communication. And oftentimes having somebody like myself that can facilitate those discussions and sometimes mediate those discussions can be important. And then, having somebody who can talk with your CPA, talk with your estate attorney, whoever else it may be that's in your professional network, to be sure that everything's in sync and everything is accounted for.
Right. Yeah, for sure. So.
Okay. So if someone wants to talk to you and engage in a conversation with you about financial planning, how do they get in touch with you?
So the best thing to do is to call my office, and number is 727-977-0838. I had to think about that for a second. And we'll have sort of a brief discussion about, what the concerns are, what your thoughts are, and how I can help. And then, assuming that sounds good, then, we would have an in-person meeting and we would start then, building a financial plan. It is not an overnight process. Right. It takes some time to develop and even just to sort of gather, bank statements and bills and, and all of that. So it can definitely be a process and take some time, and and we sort of hone it together over call it a year, and then and then we sort of go into maintenance mode, right? And then we're making, small modifications and adjustments and updates as life changes. But, you want to work with somebody that you are comfortable talking to. I'm going to say a minimum of twice a year, probably more likely 4 times a year.
Okay.
And in the beginning, it may be every 2 weeks, every month. It's a process and it requires a good amount of communication and time together to get that in place.
Yeah. And then for reiteration, you're at Edward Jones. Okay. So they can definitely find you there. Well, we really appreciate you really bringing this important insight to the community. We've had some entertainers on the show, and we've done a little 𝐾𝐞𝐚𝐧 and some dancing and stuff like that. So this was a little bit more of a serious topic, but it's just really, really important. And so we really do appreciate you coming on and talking.
My pleasure.
Paul, any final thoughts?
So if you'd like to be a guest on the Skittle Squad podcast, or if you'd like to be a sponsor of the show, you can reach us at contact@theskittlesquad.com.
Yeah, and definitely don't forget to follow us on our socials at the Skittle Squad Podcast. We will see you next time. Thanks for watching.
Bye.